you, everybody. Welcome back. So just to recap, I just want to share my feeling from what I've heard so far, Commissioner, is that we want to get to the same place as you do. As you recall, some of the restrictions we put on the program were designed hopefully to better target the money. It hasn't worked out necessarily the way anybody wanted it to, but um, there are some specific suggestions I've heard already, and I'd like to drill down, not necessarily today, but maybe something in writing if it's not already entirely in your report, is the specifics of what you like to see. I'm very sympathetic to the concern about added fixed costs, some of the things like property taxes that may have been left out. Um, and I I am interested in getting something different than tax loss, but something that still reflects reduced profitability maybe, and certainly don't want to get into the situation where the dollar gain for a year may find somebody ineligible. So we want to work with you on that, but we'd like to see absolute specifics of actually language you would like to see in terms of changes to this program, keeping in mind our concern is that we don't want it so open-ended that it becomes a discretionary program, that there has to be some written guidelines where, maybe there's some flexibility and waivers or something like that for unusual circumstances. But I want to be clear on that. And like you, we want to keep this money in the economic development pool. At this point, I'd prefer to keep it in the pool of where the governor had originally talked about, but we're open to moving things around, obviously, with our approval. So I wanted to say that. Do other people on the committee have things they want to ask about this program at this point? And I'm wondering, Senator Clarkson, and I believe it's Senator Ballant, if she's around, have some specific ideas on the creative arts you've talked about, performing arts, and the other one was lodging, I guess. What your thinking is on those? Are you thinking carve outs of money like we did in the first couple of rounds for specific industries?
I will have a bill. Stephanie Jerome and I have developed a bill with the Arts Council really targeting recovery money for the creative sector. So that's being introduced. It'll be introduced today or tomorrow. And we can incorporate it in whatever work we have, but they are asking for administration of that work. On the other hand, I mean, they work very well with ACCD, as I recall. Joan, is that correct? The Arts Council in overseeing grants. I mean, so we could do whatever we wanted, but they are asking for a specific amount of money targeted for the creative sector, which has been hammered. I mean, anything that requires admission and having people sitting next to each other or standing next to each other, from museums to performing art venues to, a whole range of things.
I think Senator Brock.
I would also add, and this may be a little bit different than the kinds of grants that we're looking at that are specifically in response to COVID, but I've got a bill in that is designed that revamps or reinstitutes the Vermont Film Commission, because I've heard a lot from folks in the motion picture industry or in supporting parts of the film industry that they are often making the films about Vermont, of Vermont, that add to our potential tourist base and the reputation of the state, but they're making them in British Columbia. They're making them in Massachusetts. In fact, the latest film that Jay Craven is making is being made in Massachusetts because, again, of subsidies. And whether or not there's any way that we can link some of that to what we're doing here, I think is at least worth talking about.
So, I mean, we've heard that, I guess, on the first day about the film commission. I just wanted to, and I want to go to Senator Ballant on the lodging industry. We have to deal with this carefully. If we start doing all these carve outs, are we at the right number? Are they subject to different standards than others? We have childcare and other kinds of stuff that also need our priority attention. It just needs some thought. Just like as I mentioned with housing, where I think I, for one, and we'll talk some more about, would like to do an omnibus bill. I'm thinking that we might want to do an omnibus economic development bill. It would give our committee more authority. The Appropriations Committee has been good in the past of essentially, here's money for economic development, you decide how to spend it. And similarly, the House last year sent us just one bill on economic development. And as I said before, that's the way Kevin Mullen used to operate. So I think we're going to have a committee discussion as to how to do this, because all of these economic development issues they intersect. Which is the most effective? I mean, we might say remote worker is not effective, but if we're only putting a few $100,000 in it, when we say, well, we want that as part of our toolbox, so every time we spend $1, it may be less for something else. So I'm thinking that maybe we could do something like that as well. Senator Ballant, I know you had been looking into the hospitality section as it, and I don't know if you have an update or want to say anything about that.
Well, I know that it is, we've been hearing from our partners in the lodging industry that it's been incredibly challenging, which is not surprising given the consistent waves of different variants coming through. And I just think this is a moment when they're really looking to help get them through what we hope is perhaps the last big surge before we become endemic. That is what I think we're all hoping. We don't know what's around the corner, but I would hate to lose a lot of our smaller lodging facilities when we, I think we've done a good job, but I think we can do better by them. And the Bridge Grant program, I think, is an example of a way in which we could tailor it more to their needs. And I hear what you're saying, Mr. Chair. It is complicated. There are many moving parts. I mean, the part that I don't know, Joan, if I was talking to you about it or someone else in your shop, that I do know that there seemed to be an indication from the auditor that although there may not be the clear bang for your buck in some industries, that it seemed to be especially important within the hospitality industry that these grants go forward. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to that a little bit, Joan. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I don't remember that actually from the auditor's report, but that doesn't mean it isn't there.
It was not from the report. Oh. It was my understanding. It was from some testimony that was given around some spots that were not as clear cut. That it seemed like this was one area in which it was having an important difference. So clearly, it was not you I was talking to, so I'll figure out who it was. But would just love to hear a little bit more about.
Yeah, I think, look, I think it's all a true statement. I mean, we don't have to delve too deep to know that performing arts and venues and lodging, they're all suffering. I mean, when's the last time you went to a concert? I mean, this is really, really, really tough, and there is uncertainty ahead. So I think when I look back at what we did for the third round, it was really about being very, 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 very careful about not giving people more than what they got. And when I say we, I mean collective we, you and us, right? So, and I think what we've seen is that really the risk? Is the risk of duplicating somebody or giving somebody a little bit more than they need, is that really higher than the loss of somebody's livelihood? So I think that's what we're dealing with. And I think we could all come to agreement that no, we want to preserve livelihoods. And the amount of scrutiny that not only was it difficult for applicants, this was an extremely difficult grant program to administer. It was expensive to put through the system. It was time consuming from all the staff. We had to go in, we had to look at each and everyone's fixed expenses. I mean, it is so onerous that we'd really have to question, is it missing the point of trying to help people get back on their feet in a whipsaw environment where 1 minute we're open, 1 minute we can't get people, another minute we're trying to distance people. I mean, this is a really, really tough environment for business. So we can't underestimate, we can't overstate that. And I think it just needs a little bit more empathy about that, about what they're facing. It's really hard to plan a winter. Look at the ski resorts. I mean, it's hard. This is difficult navigation, and to come up with some foolproof program that's going to protect everything and prevent all kinds of, it's impossible. It's like we're looking for the perfect solution, and that'll always be elusive. And so my point on discretion is not that you just give us a pot of money and we just do what we want with it. I think there has to be an element of trust and faith that we have done this now for 2 years straight. And we are all earnest and serious about this, and we want to help, and we don't want our hands tied where we cannot change anything because it's ironclad in statute. And I think at one point I implored the committee, and maybe it was House, I'm sorry if I don't mean to like misplace this, but this is the difference between giving us discretion, meaning that we have it in our guidance and we could change guidance, but we can't change statute. So that's what I mean when I say we need the discretion to say, look, we're going to come up with a program where we're going to assess need and we will examine it, because even though we had a formula, the amount of analysis for each and every application, it was, in some cases, it was 45 minutes per. I mean, so we're not solving anything by coming up with one formula. I think we just need to be able to look at the situation, determine the expense load, determine what their profitability has been, and do the math and say, no, it's obvious that this person had this small profit, but they're not going to make it through the winter, heating season. So that's what, and yeah, so to do it by sector, you're always going to leave somebody out. There's always a situation that, we may leave somebody out. But yes, hospitality, the venues, the planners, we tried to help people with fixed expenses. Well, we know that there are people that may not have had that many fixed expenses, but clearly they were out of revenue. So that didn't help them, So anyway, that's my that's my kind of spiel about it. That's why we don't have we're not coming forward with a particular formula. It's give us the opportunity to create a system, to create the guidance. And if we're finding that, it's not helping, we have the ability to change course or to make a waiver or whatever. But just, we need that. Otherwise, we're waiting a whole session.
Senator Clarkson.
So thank you. I think the sector, focusing on the sectors, although Brett's slides show that agriculture, hospitality, and what's the third, that, clearly are still in more need than many other sectors of our economy. Many
Correct.
sectors of our economy, as we are learning, are robustly recovering, which is exciting. I would also say that the challenge with sectors is all of us have constituent businesses that don't fit into those sectors. We have this amazing center in Weston that is that gathers people for all sorts of reasons that isn't quite doesn't fit into any one of those little slots. And I think that we all appreciate the fact that we have unique businesses that are impacted, and hospitality is certainly, ag, performing arts, they're all. So I agree with you, Mr. Chair. I think we just want to highlight some of these bills are simply highlighting the particular sectors. And if we bring them all together in one bill, I think that is absolutely appropriate. And I think what we're hearing this morning is discretion is needed for new workers, for remote workers, and for economic recovery.
So thank you for your comments, Commissioner. I mean, I think you framed the issue very well. And I think this is a useful conversation as a prelim to our rolling up our sleeves, because that's where the tension, I for one, do not want to impose a straitjacket on you, but I also do want to try and find some methodology to help to target the money to the businesses that are most in need. And I think I was privy to some of the things that, or the traffic that Senator Ballin talked about. And I think what the auditor was saying, he made some comments that he did think the hospitality industry was in a unique situation, but he also cautioned that even within the hospitality sector, there were some businesses that needed it more than others. And is there a way to parcel that out, or do you just give even profitable businesses the opportunity to get more money? I mean, we're in a situation, we're in a pandemic, we're blessed with a lot of money to give out. I hear a lot of attacks on workers that they got too much money, and we know a lot of the horror stories around PPP. So we just have to find that perfect tipping point. And I agree, we can't spend forever on it, and sometimes we have to give some leeway and trust. And so let's be partners in this and go forward and come up with a solution that we all can feel comfortable with, that we're doing our job. Anything else? Okay, I think we may be ready to move on to the next. So what do you have for us?
The next program. So I wonder if I should share my screen, or Brett, do you have that open where we're going right into capital investment?
Let me see.
I think it's all in the same
Yeah, I do.
PowerPoint.
Let me see if you can, let me share it.
So while we get that up on the screen, just to refresh everyone's memory, the capital investment program is a program funded by ARPA. So at the very least, all of the applicants for this would have to prove that there was some COVID impact to their project. And the idea behind it, or the impetus, was we wanted projects that would be helpful to more than just either the business or the entity that's applying, that it has some impact on workforce or supply chain, that it had some transformational qualities. And so what we didn't know was just how well subscribed this would be. Okay, so again, as I said before, we're undersubscribed in one and way oversubscribed in the other. Now, we have over 124 applications came in for an ask of 90.6 million. And you could see that the distribution is pretty good. I mean, obviously there's some of the smaller counties there. There's like maybe one application, Grand Isle and Essex. So I think that the surprise, or I could say the silver lining, is that, wow, there are some very interesting projects that are being proposed to us across the board. In here are, and I guess the next slide shows by sector, or okay. So I should just retrack a little, just to again refresh. This project, this capital investment program, not only had to meet ARPA eligibility, but it also needed to get a calculation of net fiscal impact. And net fiscal impact was going to be calculated by the legislative economist, and we also had, the administration economists working together on this. And that amount was going to constrain the amount of the award. And that net fiscal impact also was going to be a criteria for ranking of projects. We also had to achieve geographic diversity. So it's a very, what I call it is a complicated project because it's got many masters, right? There are many different parameters around this. We had to break it into 2 stages because at the very beginning, the economists were like, well, how much information do we need about these projects? All these projects are different. So the first stage was for people to tell us more about what they wanted to do. And then we did a preliminary run, like, does it meet ARPA eligibility? Did they provide match? We did require a 50% match on this so that we were not funding the entire project. And so whoever didn't was not asked back to a stage 2. Stage 2, we have 77 applications. So it got whittled down a little bit, but not much. Okay, so now we're dealing with a $65 million ask. Okay, we are in the process of that number will be whittled down a little bit more because of the net fiscal impact. So here is the project, the counties, the amount that's requested by county. I guess that's a duplication of the number of applications received. I see.
So this is
the dollar
looking
amount.
just at stage 2.
Yes, just at stage 2.
Joan,
Go to the next where, yeah.
Commissioner, we appropriated $11 million for this, is that correct?
10 and a half, yes, 10 and a half.
And then according to the governor's projection, there was another 11 available for ARPA money in the next year. Is that right?
Well, I think originally the governor's ask was $90 million on this. We wanted 30 million each year. And then I think what was decided was, well, let's do this 10 and a half. Let's see what's what. Let's see how you do.
Oh, okay. All right. I got the numbers mixed up. So it was $30 million a year, and somehow we got down to 11 for the first year. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
If we go to the next slide, it'll show the types of projects, and you'll see there is such a broad array. And this is, again, the silver lining. I mean, there are excellent agricultural projects, slaughterhouse project. There are performing arts projects, expansions and enhancements, childcare, elder care, some commercial development. There's middle market housing. There was some housing that came in and we were like, wait a minute, there's all this housing money. Well, not for middle market. And so we want to be sure that we consider all of these as there are certain gaps, even though there's lots of money coming into the state. All of them have prescribed, programs that these projects may or may not fit into. So we're very pleased with the outcome. I mean, it's a heck of a job. We have our work cut out for us. The deadline on this was December 27th. We are in the midst of organizing all of these so that we can go through them and rank them appropriately. But this just gives a good array. And this is the amounts requested by industry. And you'll see up at the top, the 10.2 million is the arts and culture category, 6.5 childcare, and 6.6 food and beverage manufacturing. And in there will be many of the value added type producers. The hospitality and lodging is in there, housing, renewable energy. I mean, this has been a pleasant surprise. And I don't know why I'm surprised, but I guess we spent so much time on the economic recovery assistance, and this is more like economic recovery rebuilding, and this is building for the future. And so we are quite pleased with the take up on this. The next, do I have another slide on this?
That's the end of the
That's the end of it, right?
So, Joan, I think I would benefit, I don't know how to do this, but to get some hard examples of what is being asked for in these grants. I don't know if that's possible at this early stage, but is there, how many arts and culture requests were there, and what's the nature of some of them?
Right, like we have a museum that's going to build out a child care center at the museum. There's a museum that's putting another wing on. There is a performing arts that's doing upgrades. There's a child care center that's being built. There's redevelopment. I don't know how detailed you want it. We got
No, no,
a
no,
lot
no.
of detail, but I just want to give you a flavor of it. We've got a redevelopment in Fairleigh, that long ago burnt down and they never had the wherewithal to come and do redevelopment. There are downtown redevelopment, like abandoned building or historic building that needs to be fit up for tenancy. Community spaces. I just think it's remarkable. There's a slaughterhouse expansion. There's a cheese producer expansion. There's a food hub. I mean, there are some great projects, and I know that we gave you a sampling of them when we were pushing this last year,
Right.
but
Yeah.
we got way more than that list that we thought we had a good grip on it. We had people coming in that had heard about it, and I just think that this is an example that good ideas are happening. Good people are collaborating, and they need some co-investment from the state, and this is a great opportunity for us to participate. So if anything, I think it just shows the demand.
And every application has to have some connection to COVID.
Yeah, every application has to have a connection to COVID, and we have quite a review process, because what we will do is when we do a preliminary selection, in addition to getting the net fiscal impact from the economists, their final write-up, we need to make sure that Guidehouse agrees. Guidehouse has given us a scale, or a kind of reference manual, if you will, about what will or will not constitute compliance with ARPA. And we are going to double and triple check that, because we don't want anyone to have to, to pay that back. But basically all of them are impacted in the sense that, just broadly speaking, construction costs have gone up considerably. Labor shortages are intense, and the delay from COVID alone has catapulted that. Childcare obviously is such an important need, not just because of COVID, but COVID clearly had an impact. Hospitality also has more of a, I was going to say free pass, but generally they are instantly eligible because the COVID impact was so severe on that sector. And if they're in a new, not a new market, but a qualified census tract. So all of those things come into consideration within our review, which is fairly extensive. Same thing with education. Education also took such a hit. So that is where we are. But since we have over 65 million in ask, clearly we will want more money, and we will also be asking for more money. I mean, the one thing that we would want to change, and I'll bring this out to you now, is that the net fiscal impact is a problematic equation when you're talking about economic recovery. Since this is economic recovery, it's funded through ARPA. To now have a calculation about net fiscal impact to the state is an added constraint that kind of flies in the face of economic recovery due to this disaster. So not only are we limiting the awards, and so for example, there's a project that is asking for $1 million, and according to the net fiscal impact calculation, it only turns out to 270,000. So are we constraining these projects unnecessarily by this calculation? The other thing inherent in the calculation then becomes this question of, well, will they do it without our money? Will they do it but for the money? And if they will, the economists would say, well, then that's zero net fiscal impact. So I think it misses the forest for the trees. It'd be interesting to get Tom Cavet's view on this, but I think we're trying to achieve too much. We're trying to do economic recovery. We're trying to do net fiscal impact, almost like a veggie calculation. There are some that may not have job creation, but are therefore still very, very good. So how do we account for that, right? How do we account and quantify social impact? So that's my plea. I mean, it may not impact this round. Like, we have to go through this round. We don't want people to wait, but we really would urge that.
Joan, I guess the question is, did you want to also address the impact of the requirement to order these by net fiscal impact?
Right, it's twofold. There's a net fiscal impact is the limit on the amount of the award. That's the first constraint. The second is the instructions in the statute tell us that we need to rank the projects by the net fiscal impact. What that means is we will fund the larger projects. So there may be a small cafe somewhere that we think is very important to that town or that community or that village, and we may not be able to fund it because it may not be competitive. So is that the intent? You know, and that's sort of an open question. So there's additional constraint and additional time necessary to do these net fiscal impact calculation, and nowhere else in ARPA are we requiring that level of net fiscal impact. You know, I think people thought maybe this was going to be where businesses were all asking. Yeah, there are some businesses in here, but generally there is a lot more nonprofit and community type, you know, and development type folks who piece together all sorts of streams to put together a project. So that's my spiel on that.
Can you refresh my memory? Were there any restrictions on profit versus nonprofit entities, municipal entities that could apply?
Oh, correct. That was the other thing. We made this open to profit and nonprofits. We did not permit municipalities.
Okay.
And one other thought might be to allow municipalities. It's going to depend on how much money could be appropriated to this, because we think there would be robust demand from the municipalities. One of the things we learned around this was there were a few municipalities that asked about this. They wanted to extend a water system, and we were like, well, can't you go to, you know, the water wastewater money? And it was like, well, no, because they didn't qualify under that program. So I thought, all right, well, that could be a gap, you know, and so maybe we could make it open to them if they could show that they were ineligible from the other programs. You know, there was a thought last year about, well, municipalities are all getting this, you know, oodles of money from ARPA. Well, that may be true, but in smaller communities, it ends up being a much smaller amount, and you can't really do a sewer extension on that. And also they require a 20% match of non-federal funding, right? So I think, yeah, I think it deserves a holistic look at that. I mean, I would consider, I felt bad that there were some that would fall through the cracks, especially if these are good projects, especially if we need housing. And you need housing, you need infrastructure, you know, so.
Well, I was just going to say, your presentation about what the municipalities have doesn't even include infrastructure money yet, right?
Right.
From feds. So, I mean, they may qualify under that pot of money too, right?
Yeah,
They may, I mean, again, go ahead.
The guidelines are yet to be written for much of that, which is part of the challenge, I think, that we face from a municipal point of view.
One of the things that we learned along the way, though, too, is that some of the programs end up getting the additional funds for the existing programs that are that are already operating, and some of those programs have the constraints about where they could do the extension. Where, you know, is it a failing system, or is it in a designated village center? So again, I think we just have to look at the projects. The good news about this program is that we learned about a project that wanted to be done that maybe was not in a village center, but so what? They wanted to extend the sewer so they could do housing. Is that not a good use, right? So these are the things that I think that come to fruition from looking at a program like this, which forces us to think, is it just about that they're going to get additional money? It's just, how could they use that money? And my understanding from the federal delegation is that on the infrastructure, it's going to go through the normal programs. They're not making a new program, but you know, I could have dated information as things change considerably, but that was our caution with this, is just, let's not rule out the municipalities. Let's think about that. You know, not be so exclusive because we think that they have additional funding.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have maybe on a lesser scale the same tension with this program as with economic recovery, in the sense that, I mean, I believe, for one, that we have a responsibility, especially with a potentially a $90 million program, to have some say, not only on the appropriation, but on the guidelines of how the money is going to be divided. And again, no straitjacket, but some baseline requirements. And, you know, it's new. They need to be tweaked as we go. And I think it's another argument for doing an omnibus bill, because we need to see these side by side. And if we try to do a bill just on the transformational projects, I know how the committee process works. We'll spend, you know, days and days just on that bill, as opposed to if we do it.
Yeah.
I mean, just so the committee knows who weren't, folks who weren't there, Senator Ballin was there. I don't think Senator Brock wasn't. But when Kevin Mullen used to do this, and I think Vince Aluzzi used to do it as well, we'd have this omnibus bill, and every day we'd be going through the sections of that bill. We'd start with everything. Some things would get jettisoned, some things would get amended, but it had a way of forcing us forward and not. So I think with all these parts, I think it might make sense to do that. And I'm sure the Pro Tem and I will be speaking with the Appropriations Committee on that. And we should make decisions both on that and housing by the beginning of next week.
Yes.
So,
Great.
I agree, Mr. Chair.
okay. Anything else that committee members or the administration wants to say on the transformational money? How do you refer to this program, Joan?
Capital investment,
Capital investment. Okay.
cap invest, or
Transformational is much sexier.
I was going to say, I love regional and transformational, and it is, I guess we should all feel, you know, this is great. I think we got it and we wanted to get this going, and I'm very excited about this program in particular. I'd love to, I think it's so positive. It's so going forward. And I know, and it's great. It's think big. It's a Daniel Burnham kind of program. Make no little plans. Only make big.
It really is great. I mean, even, you know, what's interesting and it's a lesson, right? When we have a pocket of money like this that's used in a proactive, way to build, then you learn about the stuff that's going around the state in a much more pointed fashion than just hypotheticals or answering a survey or what have you. This was great information. And we were able to also refer people to other programs, what we learned from their application. They can learn about the new programs coming out. They can learn about our existing programs. I think it's been great. Okay, what are we going into brownfields now? Or
Can I just ask, Mr. Chair, may I ask the commissioner one more question?
Yes, please.
So in looking at this chart of the amounts requested, were there surprises for you in terms of what you'd been hearing out in the field as to where the need was, and then what ended up being requested?
No, not really. I think the surprise is the breadth. That's, that the breadth of the request, the amount of differences amongst the applications, that I found, and also the regional diversification of the asks. It's not just Chittenden, it's not just Washington, it's all over the state.
Yeah.
So, yeah, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I would just add that there's some interesting dynamics in some of the applications. One that sticks in my mind is one of the ones in arts and culture, where there's an arts and culture institution here in the White River Junction area that is running out of housing, worker housing, because White River Junction is building so much of its own housing or redeveloping so much housing that they're losing the housing that's traditionally been available for workers. So it's an opportunity to build workforce housing in White River to continue the improvements that are happening there. So it's really kind of an upward spiral.
Yep.
Cool. So yes, let's try and do one more. before we break at 11. So you've got about 8, pick one that's about 8 minutes longer.
Well, then I guess that isn't brownfields. Why don't we, you mentioned you wanted a little bit of a summary on VSAT, is that right?
Yes.
And David Bradbury sent me some nice snippets of information. I don't really have a presentation on it, but just suffice to say that $970,000 across 12, what was deployed across 12 companies. 9 were brand new and 3 were existing. And 7 of the 12 meet the prioritization area of BIPOC, women, or veteran owned. So got to work very quickly. And, you know, the legislature adjourned in May. We finally got the money over to him. I guess it was August by the time that happened. And from May through December are when the new investments were funded. There's a few pending that is happening for additional companies around Vermont. So I think altogether that's been extremely useful. And I think it also is indicative of David's work in developing the pipeline of demand. So that's going to be an interesting development. We might as well talk, I could talk briefly as well about the SSBC.
Just on that one, I did attend an opening of sort with Senator Leahy at VSAT, and I don't know if you, I can't remember if you were there, Joan, or not.
I wasn't. I missed it. Sorry. It looked like a great event.
And it was good in the sense that I think, well, we put $1 million in, Leahy put like $6 million in, so they were like able to double down on that. And we'll look forward to hearing about the projects that he put the money in. Do you know if they're going to be asking for any tweaks or adjustments or additions at this point, or they got their hands full with what they have already?
I do not know that. They may be pushing for additional other sources, but I also know that we are working on the State Small Business Credit Initiative to manage this equity portion, and I believe they're interested as well in that, but that is an RFP process that we're just about, we're beginning. I mean, the deadline is up. We have to review all the applications with VITA. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good sign to show that there's good ideas happening, good ideas being turned into companies, and now the ability to fund them through a combination of state and federal money, as well as the private side. And as you know, there are other private entities that are in this. We're learning of other companies, innovative companies that have started an accelerator. So, you know, I think it's good. This is all good timing for Vermont. And I think David you should probably have him in. He could talk more about it more specifically, but I wanted to give you that review.
Okay.
Thanks.
At this point, we have 4 minutes, or we could stop and take the break now, and then we're going to go for another half hour or so after that. So you have a better idea of what you can present to us. Do you think we should stop now and come back?
Did Allison have a question, or?
Sorry.
No, I was just, you know, looking at the money we provided, and I hadn't realized Leahy had added another 6 million to that program. So I was thinking the average gift, you know, was about the average grant was about $80,000, but obviously it may have been substantially more given Leahy's contribution, given the federal contribution to that.
Yeah, there's a variety of size of investment. So yeah, I think David could speak more to that. But
no, exciting. It's great.
It is. We the other thing that we're in the midst of working on, we have not executed fully yet, is the first step on the TBED, the technology-based economic development. We had an RFP out for a technical assistance provider, and that closed on December 31st. We have to look through those proposals, and the idea here is that we get an expert that has gone through this SBIR process, that has subject matter expertise in the different federal agencies, and they could help us help those companies understand whether or not those fledgling entities are prepared, are equipped to go after it. And that could help us ultimately determine who we would end up giving match grant funding to. So we have more work to execute on the T-bed, but it's in process. So I just wanted to make sure you knew about that.
You also have some stuff going on with UVM, right? I don't know if you're still involved or is totally handed over to UVM or.
Yeah, I think UVM had their own appropriation, if I recall correctly, but we, on our technology-based economic development, we have three prongs of that. It's this technical assistance that we're just in the midst of reviewing the RFP. We're going to also develop match grant funding for those recipients of SBIR. And the third piece is a research partnership. It's a research grant that we would give to companies that want to team up with a university research team. Typically, the university will charge, we would help fund that. And UVM could be one of the universities, but we're not limiting it to University of Vermont. It could be other universities as well, just understanding that businesses may pick different.
That was the one that had a little tension at the end as to who should control that money, that last piece?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that was it.
Okay. Okay, let's break till 11:10 and we'll go to somewhere between 11:30 and 11:45 on Thursdays. We end a little early so Allison and I can meet with Representative Clarkson, Senator Clarkson and I can meet with